All right, good morning, everyone. Most people, I think it's still morning, whatever time zone you're in, maybe some sort of early afternoons, but hopefully most of you there in the morning. Great to see people. I'll maybe give it maybe one more minute before we get started. Get a few more people online. I'm going to wait until, there we go, 31. All right, I'm going to get started. So welcome to our latest panel event. Today we will be hearing from two Agile marketing pioneers and one bright Agile marketing pioneer as well, who have gone beyond those buzzwords of Agile marketing to really activate these ways of working in their teams. So we're really excited to have you guys on the panel today to really discuss and understand a little bit more of like the how of how it actually works rather than the theory. So first of all, welcome to Catharina, to Marketing Growth Director of Emerging Markets at ADP. Kat, I will let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hey, good morning to most of you. Catharina Rozendaal. I've been working with ADP for almost 5 years already. And for those of you who don't know ADP, ADP is the world's biggest payroll and HR provider out there. Currently in the role of Growth Director for the Emerging Markets region. I'm based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I'm Dutch, but the region in my responsibility is quite scattered. So it differs from UAE to Nordics, from Austria to North Africa. And it are really the regions where we as ADP are really greenfielding, so new territories for our organization. And yeah, of course, marketing is a driving force in order to enter those markets.
Great, thanks, Kat. And then joining us from Informa Markets, we have the Group Marketing Director, Emily. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Emily. I look over our Egypt, our real estate and our energy businesses at Informa Markets. And our role within Informa Markets is driving events and media. So within our business, our marketing teams are mostly responsible for driving visitors to huge scale events, as well as driving leads in for our sales team. So they have a dual role. As you imagine, in the events world, we have also a very cyclical nature to the way we work. So we have huge peaks and slightly smaller troughs. So what we really were interested about with Agile is how we can use that within the business to manage those timeframes. So yeah, really interested and excited for the call today.
Great, thank you. And finally, we have Sian, who's our Agile Marketing lead at Bright. Sian.
Yes, morning everyone. Looking forward to talking all things activating Agile marketing. So I've been at Bright for between 6 and 7 years. I can never fully remember. But I probably will bring two lenses to this conversation in the sense that we deliver projects in an agile way. I've also worked in blended teams with our team and other businesses, and I've also worked with businesses to actually adopt agile ways of working within their teams and taking more of a coaching, mentoring, scrum master role. So a few different lenses that I'm looking forward to sort of sharing today.
Great. Well, thank you to all our panelists and welcome. I will be your panel host today. My name is Lydia. I am the Marketing Transformation Lead at Bright. I have been working Agile and working with Agile marketing for over 8 years. I'm working with a lot of brilliant clients like these guys here today to understand how they can shift their focus to be more effective as a team, working primarily with the B2B and tech and consulting marketplaces. So these guys are totally our prime example of a brilliant client. So really excited to hear what we have to say today. Before we dive in, might be a few of you here who really don't necessarily feel that familiar with what Agile is and what Agile marketing is. So just real brief intro that Agile is an approach which originated within software development and is applied to marketing to help identify and focus teams around collective efforts and high value projects. It's a brilliant approach if you're looking to reinvent your marketing, break down silos, and work more effectively as a team to deliver towards a common outcome. Really focused on how we can deliver business value, organise ourselves as a team, and work towards these solutions. So with that, enough from me. I'm going to go to our panel and start opening up the questions for today. So first of all, let's get started with, how have you found activating agile marketing within your teams and businesses? Can you share some examples of how you might have done that? It's going to go to Emily.
I'm happy to jump in. So when we were looking at agile, first up, actually, we had a pre-session with Bright as marketing leaders across the business. And when we were looking to then implement that within our teams, we wanted to try and keep it as simple as possible. Now, some of the discussions previously were around using our entire marketing campaign and boiling that down into everything working in this agile framework straight out. And that's a move that we ended up not making because we felt we needed to onboard our teams first. So we chose two products within our business to do a shorter term 1 to 2 month project on, specifically around driving net new data into the business in our awareness phase. And what this really did is help us kind of create a singular goal. Yeah, I'll come on later to some of the great results we had around it. But I think it's worth highlighting that for us, this was both about the project and the goal, but also about the mindset. So overall, we've been really thrilled with the results that we've had.
Great, thank you. And Kat, how about you? Have you found activating agile?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned, Emily, the mindset, getting that within the people's most important. Like I said, my region is quite scattered, so my day-to-day work is spread all over the world. I do not work with one team particularly. My challenge is to work with different teams across the globe, activating across the globe, and working within the marketing organization at ADP. Everybody's also quite scattered. And before implementing the agile approach, we often felt that everybody is working in their own silo. So pulling everyone in that agile framework, it really is a challenge in such a big company. So the agile sprints we do, I pull in marketing stakeholders and marketing team members, but also other departments, mostly even sales. I align with sales a lot. It allows me to create insight in each other's process, in each other's workflows, and we can also support each other in the time being, not just supporting me or supporting marketing. I think a good benefit of it allows the team to hold each other accountable in those projects, which in my opinion, in my experience, really speeds up the process. Agile, therefore, I think is also a way of working that allows me to adapt fairly easy to the different needs I have within my different region, but still safeguarding, I would say, fast results almost. It improves productivity across the teams. And in the end, it contributes to the goal I have, getting foot on the ground, setting up the marketing machine in a new region, and hopefully driving our brands and generate leads, of course.
Thank you. And Sian, I know you've got a wider range of variety, but pick on some key ones for you. How have you found activating agile?
Yeah, well, yeah, as you say, Lydia, I've kind of seen the whole gamut, teams sort of taking to it quite quickly, those that struggle with it. And I think, Emily, to your point, I think it's really interesting when you were talking about the mindset, because I do also see a lot of teams. There's, some teams will focus on doing agile, others will focus on being agile, and less of the process to get started with. So I'm just trying to think about something succinct to say here, but I think all in all, from my experiences, and we'll talk more about this as we go on, I think there's a lot of common challenges, but otherwise I tend to find that teams are really excited about adopting these new ways of working. It is, and this is what we're going to talk about today, more about the how. So
great, thank you. And that does lead us quite nicely onto our next question, which maybe, Emily, for you to take here is, what has been the most important aspect you wanted your teams to adopt and focus on? When you entered this, you thought, this is what I'd like you to focus on.
Of course. From my side, I think this was kind of threefold here. So the first was around having a long-term goal and working back from it. All too often we think too either short-term, or we have a huge overall goal but no idea how to get there. So this was the first thing, is how do we look at kind of our North Star goal, and then think in smaller fragments, how do we actually break this down? So I guess that's the first element. The second one is then around actually having a short-term goal. So once we've broken those down, how do we then create something that creates a little urgency within the team? So especially for projects and understanding that the projects are going in the right direction, creating those metrics that are helping you get there. And then the final one around kind of the aspects to focus on was, again, back to kind of everyone's earlier point, is around that team way of working, that being agile side. And one of the things that we've found through doing that is, firstly, the move of mindsets between our teams. Our teams actually worked directly with Bright for their first campaigns, but all of them that have been involved have taken on the framework to do future campaigns with, and even used the way of working to collaborate with them external stakeholders as well. And we're finding that really interesting as a new methodology as well. So yeah, so I guess quite a broad answer, but there were three different ways that I needed the team to start looking and at how they approach the challenges that they've got ahead of them. And yeah, and I think Agile's been really strong in doing that.
And then how did you tackle building those teams in terms of that mindset, the training, nurturing behaviours, etc.? What do we think was the first elements?
From my side, it was about, first up, understanding my own limitations as a leader. So we, as I mentioned, we're lucky enough to have a kind of kick-off over the Agile framework just at the end of last year. Now, when we were kind of onboarded, we could really see the value of it. However, for the teams to be onboarded, I kind of had to get my head around the fact that I wouldn't be the person to teach them how to work in this new framework. You know, I've only been kind of recently introduced into the Agile way of working, and actually, we all know that when you're implementing something new, you need real experts at the top. So what we've done is I guess a different way to how I've run teams in the past. You know, you kind of get used to being the subject matter expert that's training your teams directly, and actually I think where it was really valuable was instead to have kind of an expert trainer teaching them as well as teaching me. So yeah, that was my way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting comment, I think, as well, because there's a new thing, like this is a new way of working, and for leaders, they need to understand where they can step in and out and perhaps do some leadership level training of how you lead and govern these ways of working, rather than just a right, here's the new process, off you go, get going with it. And I guess it's Sian, anything from you on that one? How much training might help? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Emily's covered kind of like the core points there, because I do think it's really important to make sure that all of your team, like all of the people that are going to be involved, have a fundamental understanding and you know that understanding is consistent across the board, and that it's not just a theoretical learning either. There is some practical considerations brought into it. You know, you've got to do it to really experience it and to work out, you know, what's working well and what's not. But you know, that bridge between the theory and getting started is a really critical component of any training program as well. Otherwise, you're kind of risking that your teams are just going to get blocked at the starting block and they're just not going to be able to get out of it.
All right, so we've heard some lovely things about how great it is. Let's go to some of these common challenges. What are the challenges that you face? Maybe Kat, you can help us there.
There are challenges, don't get me wrong, but I think biggest challenge activating Agile within the organization for me is getting past that first time actually using the Agile framework, the Agile approach, using the tooling, seeing how it comes to life. I think with ADP, together with you, Lydia, we did loads of kickoff sessions in order to let the topic really land with people. But as it often goes, I'm a firm believer in learning by actually doing it, incorporating it in their day-to-day task. The challenge really within ADP, I think, was that first step. Everybody is a little bit hesitant toward the topic also. And I think in the beginning, when you talk about Agile being a buzzword, it's really perceived also as something more hypothetical instead of something that in the end will make their lives easier. So the perception of another task, another way of working, it was perceived as another workload on top of their already existing admin, their existing day-to-day workload. And that is, of course, totally not what Agile stands for. Another challenge, I think, was confusion in the different Agile roles that exist. So making sure it lands with people and making it clear that once you've done something in the past, it doesn't automatically means like this is your go-to forever Agile role to take on. And I think also another challenge is really think about when do you want to start activating, start trialing, what's the best timing? Is it the end of the year? Do you want to tackle like the bigger projects that have accumulated across the year? Do you want to starting at the beginning of the year with fresh new projects? So yeah, I think those are challenges and stuff to keep in the back of your head when you want to start this Agile journey within your organization.
Emily, you had a similar point around the timing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually completely agree with everything Catharina said. For us, we had 2 projects running. One of them was chosen to work in a really good time, and the other one was chosen straight after one of our peaks. And I think it wasn't, from my side, the best way of structuring a new implementation of anything new. I also completely agree around this this buzzword element. The challenge I think people see is actually that they consider Agile to be overcomplicated, whereas actually it's a simplification of the way that you're doing things at the moment. I think allowing people who aren't necessarily the managers to also take the lead on the projects that they're running was a mindset shift as well for our teams. We're not a hierarchical organization. However, you do tend to have managers leading execs and the managers taking the overall responsibility, and this kind of new way of working where everybody had their own individual responsibility had, I think, some initial teething problems. However, actually in the long run, this has ended up being really valuable for us. And then the final one, actually, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning, as a challenge is, firstly, people tried to look at their to-do list and put it all into how they can do their to-do list in an agile way, rather than throwing out the way that they were going through item by item to tick off, and looking at the goal and actually kind of redoing their activities based on what that goal should be. And then the other side is just trying to do too much. So yeah, we had quite a few different things that we worked out. Actually, also the technology piece was one of them as well. We started off with one type of project management technology that the teams just weren't enjoying and weren't adopting, and actually ended up a week in switching over to another that then worked a lot better. So we had to be agile within our agile marketing.
Always. But I was just going to say before we move on, I think that goes back to that doing versus being agile, because you know, when you're doing agile, to your point, Emily, when they're just trying to do their to-do list in an agile way, you are almost adding extra tasks. It does feel like an extra workload because you aren't doing the mindset piece as well, which is prioritization, thinking about your outcomes over your outputs, and you know, really sort of like realigning. So I do think you have to do both at the same time. You might put more emphasis on one side versus the other, but it doesn't work without looking at both elements.
Certainly. I think the other point that's critical out of all of those common challenges is that where we see a driver internally from the business to adopt agile, and maybe the software teams are already using it, is that we just lift and shift their language into marketing, and it's just adding another layer of complexity into a new process. So how do you blend the terms that you're using for agile with how you, to your point, Kat, around the roles? Do we need to change the names of the roles, or do we just put them into the hub? Like, how do you do that? And I think that does need some upfront organizational thinking for the teams, because otherwise you're just putting another layer of terminology onto a already very complicated acronym filled marketing field that we have. All right, just a pause there. We've had some questions coming in, and we'll wrap up with some questions at the end, but please do drop them into the chat throughout and we will pick them up towards the end of the sessions. We'll leave about 10 minutes that we can cover off as well. Okay, so on to a little bit of point about the leaders. How can leaders ensure their employees are aligned with the vision and goals necessary for successful agile marketing implementation? Kat, one for you.
I think key in this is it needs to be understood from the beginning within the leadership team that this process will take time. It will not happen overnight, like you said, Emily, and also you confirmed, Sian. In the beginning, people will have the tendency to incorporate everything in Agile and to almost pile their to-do list on. And that can be perceived, I think, as quite overwhelming by somebody who has been doing their normal day, their normal routine for quite a while now. So defining a shared strategy, making sure the objectives, what do we want to get out of this agile approach, are clear. And just also really be open with your team. Be open about what are the issues you want to tackle with this approach. Secondly, it's been repeated already, it's a long-term vision, even though that, in my opinion, Agile, the day-to-day approach, is it's quite a short-term effect because it will be implemented immediately. In the end, it's day-to-day, but it will contribute to individual success. But in the end, it will lead to one clear Agile mission and vision, and really letting people understand where they take place in that organization and how they contribute to that journey. I think that's very important. In the end, in order to realize all of that, I think you need to have buy-in from management. And I would almost say, I think the correct term is leading by example. So yeah, goes both ways.
Yeah, definitely. I guess Emily or Sian, anything to add to that one?
Get the nail on the head there, but I would also just add having one singular goal for it. Simplify your first couple of projects, or even I imagine actually going into projects once you're a fully fledged agile team is keeping things simple. I think in all too many areas we tend to overcomplicate, especially in already complex businesses. So yes, having a clear thought about what you want to achieve as a leader will then push down to your teams on them being able to have a clear goal in mind for what they want to do within their agile projects.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point here. It's like, how have we got to a point in marketing where, if we talk outside agile, is that we are always constantly overloaded with loads of different things, and the focus is lost. And it's why we can struggle to show business value from the marketing activity. So one of the core concepts here is not just putting in the practice of agile. It's like, how do we actually do that to simplify what we do to be more effective? And that's the big why, I guess. And I know this session is more about the how, but the big why around agile does need to be kept in mind for the vision. You can't just talk about the how without the why. Okay, so how can we encourage the adoption of agile for maybe employees across the business at any level?
I think first and foremost, put enough training sessions in place. But when the training sessions end, or maybe even from the beginning of the sessions, try to connect it to a real project to make it click within the different teams. And like you say, Emily, keep it simple. Don't do everything all at once. This is, in my opinion, really moving beyond the buzzword within the organization. Because to be honest, we all know how it goes. There's another tool you need to use, another message to adapt to. I think we as marketeers, we've seen so many in the past years. We are often at the forefront of driving that type of innovation within the organization. But in order to let it land in people's mind and make it come alive, use a real project. Not the most priority projects, but really think about, I would advise small to medium-sized projects to tackle in an agile approach. Start working in those sprints, start setting up those hub meetings. You will see that eventually people and your team members will ease into it. They will start seeing the benefits of this way of working. And they will automatically adapt it in their bigger projects as well. Within ADP, when implementing Agile, I think an important eye-opener for us was also identify Agile champions. Almost like internal spokespersons within the organization outside of management. Their enthusiasm, I think, will connect on a different level with your team members, with your peers, and will pull the last doubters in as well. I think that's an important aspect, instead of just doing everything top down, making sure that you show your peers like, okay, this is how it's helping me. These are the results I'm getting. Yeah.
And you worked quite a lot with the sales, as you mentioned earlier on in this panel. So it's interesting to work outside of marketing as well. This isn't just about working within the marketing team. It's about connecting people who can help move these projects forward.
Yeah, and I think also we as marketeers working with sales, it sometimes feels like we need to get sales activated and involved, and they are more focused on their sales target and pulling them into the agile framework, working together with them in those sprints. It really helped me also creating some insights for them, like the huge amount of workload that belongs to marketing and what we are doing in order to support the sales organization, and also, to be honest, to keep them accountable for some of those aspects. And yeah.
All right, let's go to the thorny topic of measurement. So how can we talk about kind of managing resistance? Like how can we measure this success? And I guess, Emily, you mentioned at the beginning of this that you'd had some great successes with in the actual tangible results from these projects.
Absolutely. So just on kind of, I guess, resistance, I'm really lucky in the business I work for and the marketing team I work with. is that the marketers that I work with by their nature are curious and interested. That for me is one of the critical parts of actually being a marketer. So when you kind of suggest a new initiative or a new way of working, and then by and large everyone's really interested and excited. Also, it is a truth universally acknowledged that marketers are time poor. So if we're also then messaging that this is going to help them optimize their time, then this also kind of helps that resistance. Now, that was before we had results. What we then did is we created 2 achievable but stretch results, not impossible, but a significant stretch, just feeling like beyond reach in what we would usually be seeing coming through. Of 3,000 new pieces of data in the space of a month, from conceptualize to creation of the contents that we were going to do, to pushing out the content and distribution, through to actually acquiring those leads and then being able to put them into our nurture flows. So we overachieved on those goals. And so what we had at the beginning of maybe kind of a while curious mindset, maybe it's slightly apprehensive mindset, is we now also have the case studies of this is the value that these teams have driven, which has then been really helpful. And I have other teams across the portfolio I work across now who are interested in learning and seeing how they can also do this, because they then see the long-term value and impact that will have on them, their campaigns, but also on their ability to kind of manage their time as efficiently as possible. So yeah, I mean, I think I've probably been quite lucky. Also, unlike Catharina, I've only embedded this within our marketing team to date. So we haven't had to use any other internal stakeholders. But and our external stakeholders that we work with are also open to this change. So yeah, so I've been lucky, but I think as well, now having done it, I have the tools that if anybody was resistant to change, I have the tools to be able to show them this is the value of what you'll get on the other side.
Absolutely, having that actual win. Here's your fundamental evidence. And one of the things that we perhaps haven't talked on is the fact that this is a data-driven approach to marketing. So part of the activating Agile is creating your data, creating the story that helps to sell this on, so that we can look at scaling it across the business. Oh, anything, Sian, on measurement? Anything that you could?
Well, yeah, so I mean, on the measurement piece, I guess there's 2 ways that you can, I'm sure there's other ways, but here's the 2 ways that I look at it, I should probably say. So I think on the one side, and I think it goes to what kind of the point that you were saying in some ways, Emily, like you can look at what Agile has enabled you to do. And as marketers, we always have baselines. We already know how our current activity is performing. So another way to kind of look at it is, if you're implementing Agile, how does it help you move the dial? If you were doing X beforehand, what are you doing now? So there's classic things from a performance perspective that you can be measuring that feeds back into that effectiveness piece. And then there are the sort of like classic Agile methodology metrics around throughput, number of experiments that being run, et cetera, how many tasks you're able to complete within a sprint. And when you're starting, you probably just want to use your first couple of sprints to almost build your baselines. And then from that, you can then see how, as they're adopting it and getting more comfortable and they're getting more mature in their implementation of Agile, you can see how that's improving, or perhaps not, because it's a journey, right? You're not going to go. It's not going to be a hockey stick curve all the way up. It's going to be mountains. So I think, having those baselines and then having those measures are really good ways to celebrate the successes, but also start to perhaps find early on where you might be starting to see some pinch points and some barriers in the journey.
Absolutely. I think with some of the projects that we've run over the last, just the most recent ones in the last year, it's interesting to see how there were things have not gone so well in the first few months, even in the first few sprints, because you then understand, well, if we're not going to reach our target if we carry on at this pace, and we can make some fundamental changes and call it early, rather than getting to the end of the project and going, oh, well, never mind, we didn't quite get there. Well, okay, so we've had a few questions come in. I'm just going to start with perhaps some top level ones and say, top tip. Give me your top tip. If there was one piece of advice that you'd give to the team, Kat, go for it. What would you give?
Yeah, then I go first. I think top tip for Agile to work within the organization. I think also what you've mentioned, Sian, like all employees must feel comfortable with the Agile framework and the Agile process, but they should also feel comfortable bringing forward, I think, their ideas and observations to the group. And I think this means that decision makers and the Agile facilitators, they should also actively seek out feedback, encourage the debate, express the hesitation that there is, and in the end create change in the process when appropriate. Agile, in my opinion, stands for adaptable, adjustable, and I think you do just that with keeping that conversation open. And that's, for me, I think the only way moving forward is getting everybody on board, everybody feeling comfortable, instead of you keep finding that hesitation throughout the sessions. People see it as an add-on. Yeah.
Thank you. Emily?
Agreed. I really like that element around feeling comfortable. Yeah, that's completely critical. For me, I would have to say something like simplify. Have just one single goal. Have one single goal and get experts to help you reach it. Have that goal and just remember that kind of the technology piece is there to enable you to get to that goal. It is not the point of the project. And then finally, as kind of Lydia just mentioned, have that goal and keep it front of mind throughout every single stage of that Agile project. So if you're looking a week in, like you're not going to reach that one single goal, look at it, address it, understand where it's breaking down. Because for me, that is the biggest part of the Agile mindset, is looking and changing things as we're going through it, as opposed to getting to the end and finding that we haven't hit the target, or we haven't hit the target, but expectations have been managed. And I think that's really it for me, is simplifying it down to one goal and always keep that goal in mind.
Sian?
Yeah, I've literally, you've all been saying the ones that I would classically go for. So I think above and beyond that, and it ties, Emily, into some of what you've been saying, but I think there's also a really critical component here that you've got to be kind to yourselves as you're going through this, and you have to be open to the fact that things aren't always going to work out the way that you hoped them to, or that the way that you wanted them to. And Emily, you were talking about managing expectations, but I think it's the point of being kind of being open to the fact that you're going to set some targets that perhaps you over-egged it, or for other reasons they aren't gonna, you aren't quite going to hit them. The positive there is that you've coursed it early, you've been able to course correct and manage expectations and sort of move forward. And I think you've got to remember that we are people, which means that we are driven a lot by our emotions, fear, frustration, anger, all of those things. So there's got to be an element of that empathy and kindness to yourselves as well as within your team that is really important to kind of making it work.
There's just one question that I think might be interesting to answer, actually, that's come in saying, can you give an example of an agile marketing project that resulted in a success, but would not have been successful if you'd done it in a traditional way?
I'm going to give, I know, Emily, you've probably got a story that you might be able to share here, but I think that's a really difficult one, because it's hard to say when some about the unsuccessful piece. But what I would say is that campaigning is a great one from an agile perspective, because you can go into market early, test, validate, and optimize as you go. Whereas if you've spent 6 months creating a campaign that kind of flops, that's 6 months that's been lost. So that's one classic example of a project that definitely works really well from an agile marketing perspective, around that, in market testing, experimentation, optimization as you go.
I got a good example of not particularly a marketing a project, but one of the projects I've did with sales in the past couple of 5 weeks. So like mentioned earlier, one of my biggest challenges is going into new territories across the globe. But ADP is a very sales-driven organization, so we often think sales first and then all the rest comes later. So I find myself in a situation where we have active salespeople on the ground, but there's no market knowledge, there's no marketing fundamentals even set up in country. So throughout the past couple of 6 weeks, we've really started high over with marketing scoping. We did it in an agile approach. We did it even in sprints of weeks, where we worked together with the salespeople, scope the market, do market research. Then the next week, one step down. Which verticals are most interesting? Next week, even one step down, check out who are the prospect accounts. And for me, in this process, I think Agile is a good example of a tool in how to keep the speed in it, how to keep the sales team accountable, but also how to activate them instead of just marketing doing all the work, really working together with them. So I think that's a good example of not doing it in a traditional way. Say, hey guys, I need 30 prospect accounts in order to deploy some marketing activity on it, but really working together, and letting them understand the value of working in those sprints. And to be fair, like, marketing is always very firm on sales, but we need to be honest, right? We can say that here in this group amongst marketeers.
I'll add actually as well to Sian's point. I think what is really critical to remember is that it's not a silver bullet. It's not that your teams can't do a campaign. It's the teams and the projects we've run and appreciate that there's a lot more agile, mature teams out there. The teams that I've worked with, the agile projects that they've run has saved them significant amount of time. So that's the difference between traditional and non-traditional, or traditional and agile, is I think the projects and the outcomes that we reached would have maybe taken 3 to 4 months to reach if we'd done it in a traditional way, and achieved it in 6 weeks in an agile mindset. So I saw a question actually just come in as well around kind of the biggest business benefit, and those two are one and the same to me. Is it's a massive time saver for us, and so that's the critical part for me, and how it differentiates to how we were working before.
It's not always the changing of the results, it's actually getting to the results earlier and then allowing us to, as you said, Sian, to iterate. And it's interesting to see the comparisons of doing it in a campaign, but also how it can apply to market research, which can tend to be
Absolutely
quite a hefty project in market research.
Time intensive.
Definitely. Well, thank you everyone for all the questions. We've had a few more come in, but we are at time, so I will make sure that we cover those off, perhaps in some follow-up posts as well, so that we can all see the answers going out to share with everybody. The 2 things I just wanted to wrap on actually today is saying, first of all, thank you guys for joining us. There are some really interesting points as we took the final question there around your top tips, we got the clarity of vision, listening, keeping it simple and being open. I think a core takeaway for everyone today is that the being agile drives the doing of agile, and often that is something that gets forgotten, but as we've talked throughout the questions today, that's really come up for me, and is something that I think we can kind of continue to consider on as well. So finally, thank you everyone. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for chatting to us and sharing all your insights. We will be sharing the recording of the session along with a reading list, and also keep an eye out for the next round of reframe cards if you haven't seen them already. Just little online digital cards and prompts to help you reignite those conversations, make sure that you're reframing your thinking, and really help everybody to get going with Agile. We believe it's such a great way of working, and teams are really energized by it. So thank you, everyone. We've been Bright. We deliver business value by giving marketers the power to do great work. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.